In the beginning, the Taliban received a lot of help against America from caves. In fact, the Afghan province of Kandahar and the Tora Bora mountain regions, there are countless such caves in which Afghans had hidden weapons from the time of Soviet Russia. Then during the Taliban era as well, a large stockpile of weapons was collected in these caves so that in difficult times they could be useful. Some of these caves friends were natural, but most of them were built by the Taliban and before them Afghan Mujahideen with the help of America, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia with their money and with the help of their engineers. In fact, if we say it truthfully, this was actually a network of caves which were also connected to each other from different places. It had such maze-like paths that if someone got trapped in it, it could be difficult for them to get out. So the Taliban's first Shura which was called the Gardi Jungle Shura, helped their fighters using the weapons hidden in these caves. The Gardi jungle area is located a little ahead of the Pak-Afghan border inside Pakistani Chagri. It is a small area on the Pakistan side. In Gardi jungle there was a large camp of Afghan refugees who had come in search of peace from Afghanistan in 2001 and 2003. It is known why this barren desert-like area is called Gardi jungle, but it is called so anyway. In its center a stream flows which only occasionally sees water. So friends, the Taliban era governor of Kandahar, Mullah Muhammad Hussain, formed a Shura in the last days of 2002 and it spread its influence across Afghan provinces Kandahar, Helmand, Zabul and Afghan. Since this Shura was formed in the Afghan refugee camp in Gardi jungle in Pakistani it was called the Gardi Jungle Shura. Mullah Muhammad Hussain was its head and with him were some mid-level Taliban commanders who ran this Shura in different ways. And various commissions were divided among them. In the beginning, this Shura provided its fighters with weapons taken out from those caves. At the start, they did not even have money to pay salaries to the Taliban who were being recruited because America's control had just recently been established and immediately gathering financial resources was very difficult for them. Also, apart from Mullah Hussain, none of them was a charismatic commander who could receive international support. Even so, this entire Shura was continuously trying to expand its control, but the biggest problem in gathering resources and expanding influence did not come from America. Rather, it came from senior Taliban commanders. Senior commanders such as Mullah Farooq, Mullah Zadullah, Mullah Abdul Ghani, brother Sirajuddin Haqqani and Mullah Akhtar Mansoor were among them. These commanders were during those days 2001 and 2002 making strong efforts to form a central Shura. The Shura they were trying to form was called the Rahbari Shura because their objective was to gather the scattered Taliban fighters under one command leadership. Friends, between 2002 to 2003, one-leg Taliban commander Mullah Dadullah was continuously traveling from Afghanistan to Karachi, from Karachi to Quetta, and from Quetta back to Kandahar and Helmand regions of Afghanistan. During the 1980s war against Soviet Russia, one of his legs had been severely injured and later had to be amputated. When he came to Karachi, he had a mechanical leg fitted in place of the amputated one which helped him walk. Mullah Dadullah wanted to bring together the remaining Taliban on one platform and also increased their numbers. He was the person who, just 1 year after the American attacks, had started reorganizing his people again. He had already formed his front and started operations. He used to send his fighters for attacks, saying, "Complete the operation and return, otherwise do not come back." Due to his extremely harsh nature and intense anger, Taliban commanders and fighters feared him. In fact, many commanders later said in international interviews that by 2005 to 2006 they had started considering Mullah Abdullah a liability, a burden, because he would go to extremely brutality in attacks which caused problems for the Taliban among local populations. He also used to release videos of suicide bombers and brutal killings of officials in a style similar to ISIS, whereas this was not a common practice among Afghan Taliban. That is why he was often compared to Al-Qaeda linked Iraqi commander Abu Musal al-Zarqawi. So anyway friends, it was Mullah Abdullah who first started efforts to establish a central organization called the Rahbari Shura. For this he maintained continuous contact with senior Taliban leaders present in Quetta. Among these senior commanders, Mullah Abdul Ghani brother, who had come to Quetta, was at the top. He was a founding member of the Afghan Taliban and was already trying to form a central organization to conduct operations against America and its allies and to arrange consistent resources for fighters. Through all these efforts, the Taliban's center, the largest shura, came into existence, which was called the Rahbari Shura. Friends, this is the same Rahbari Shura which was repeatedly referred to in the national media as the Quetta Shura. In reality, there was no official body named Quetta Shura, but since it was secretly formed in Pakistan's Balochistan province connected to Helmand and Kandahar, and many of its leaders were based around Quetta, it came to be known by that name. In the Rahbari Shura were Mullah Dadullah, Mullah Abdul Ghani brother, Mullah Abdullah, Mullah Muhammad Muttaqi, Mullah Akhtar Mansoor and Mullah Farooq among others. Altogether it was an initial body of about 20 to 25 commanders. These people had held important positions during the Taliban era. Several commissions were formed within the Shura and responsibilities were divided. The most important was the military commission headed by Mullah Dadullah, making him the first chief military commander of the Rahbari Shura. Similarly, a justice commission was formed under Mullah Abdullah, who had also been head of the Sharia court during Taliban rule. Political matters were handled by Mullah brother and foreign relations and funding was assigned to Mullah Muttaqi. Other commissions were also assigned to different commanders. The formal announcement of this census of Shura was made in June 2003, so a press release issued from a sectoral location. It should be remembered, friends, that Mullah Muhammad Omar never directly participated in this shura, although he endorsed it through a message stating that the Taliban should consider it their sole representative body and if any global negotiations were to take place, they should be conducted through this shura. In early 2003, when the Rahbari Shura was formed, Mullah brothers sent a message to Mullah Hussain, the head of Gardi Jungle Shura, asking him to dissolve his organization and join them. Mullah Hussain refused and preferred retirement over accepting brothers' leadership. However, most of his companions in the front under him accepted the authority of the Quetta Shura. Mullah Hussain became ineffective and moved from Kandahar to Pakistan's Waziristan region, or later was found dead under unknown circumstances. The first Shura, formed in April 2002, ended in 2003, and its members came under the Quetta Shura. Friends, like Gardi Jungle Shura, there were many other Shuras operating across Afghanistan, and gradually, one by one, they all came under the Quetta Shura. Friends, when those who were considered the uncontested leaders of the Rahbari Shura were trying to gather all the scattered fronts and Shuras in one place, they faced strong resistance from one side. This place was a very powerful shura of eastern Afghanistan. This shura was militarily very tough, and bringing it under their control was a very difficult task for Mullah Abdul Ghani brother and Mullah Dadullah. This was the Miran-Shah Shura, and its leader was Jalaluddin Haqqani. Since he belonged to the Pakistani tribal area of Miran-Shah and that was his base, it was called the Miran-Shah Shura. This is the same Shura which became famous in the international press as the Haqqani Network. It was formed in April 2003, and it is said that Retired General Hamid Gul and Maulana Fazlur Rahman were also present at its founding ceremony. This Shura was much stronger than the Gardi Jungle Shura. It had a much large number of fighters, and it also had a great ability to generate its own resources compared to other small Shuras. Jalaluddin Haqqani's son Sirajuddin Haqqani, who is now the interior minister in the new Taliban government of Afghanistan, was its main commander. The initial area of operation of this Shura included eastern Afghanistan provinces such as Paktika, Khust and Logar, and you can say it extended up to Kabul. That means almost all of eastern Afghanistan was under its influence. It had a network in about 46 districts. These made up 4 provinces where they had appointed their shadow rulers called Masulin. In this way, the Miran-Shah Shura or Haqqani Network gained the status of central power very early because it had developed a central command and control structure. The most intense attacks on American and Allied forces during the entire 20 years were carried out in this Shura. Even in the beginning, it was the most effective militarily. However, in the early attacks, they suffered heavy losses themselves. After that, they found a solution by speeding up recruitment so that they could quickly cover their losses. For recruitment, the Miran-Shah Shura sent teams to many madrasas along the Pakistan-Afghanistan border and hired children and young people with religious inclination. From there, they started getting a large number of manpower. The most dangerous weapon of the Haqqani network was suicide attack, which they call Fidayan attacks. For this as well, the administrators of madrasas along the border provided them great help. These people would prepare hundreds of such innocent children from their madrasas and surrounding areas who, according to them, were willing to wear explosives vests and blow themselves up. So Mullah Dadullah and Mullah Abdul Ghani brother, who were the most powerful figures in the Rahbari Shura, wanted to bring this Miran-Shah Shura under the Rahbari Shura like the other Shuras, so that the war could be commanded from a central place and their collective strength could be shown to the world. Thus, in 2003, senior leaders of the Quetta Shura convinced the Miran-Shah Shura, meaning the Haqqani group, to accept their authority. Sirajuddin Haqqani agreed to this under some conditions, and 2 of his representatives became an important part of the Quetta Shura. And this way, their subordinate officials and shadow governors of the Haqqani network in Afghan provinces also came under the Quetta Shura. But friends, Sajuddin Haqqani's group and the Shura did not dissolve. With formal permission from the Rahbari Shura, they continued their operations while maintaining their autonomous status. In fact, the Miranshah Shura fought the guerrilla war in a much more aggressive manner than the Rahbari Shura. During the years when the Rahbari Shura was far away from Kabul, even major operations like bomb blasts inside Kabul were mainly carried out by the Haqqani group. Their influence was so strong that the American President, Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, and the Pentagon all used to mention them in their interviews and statements. So, friends, from all these events, you must have understood that by 2003, the Taliban had formed a central institution under which they were going to fight the coming war. The first objective of this Central Rahbari Shura was to strengthen its bargaining position in front of America and the world. Initially, removing America from Afghanistan was not among their immediate goals, but obviously the long-term objective was that America and its allies should completely leave Afghanistan. To achieve their goals, they needed a lot of funds, military of dollars. From 2003 onwards, the Rahbari Shura contacted local traders, landlords, supporters in Arab countries, intelligence agencies of Pakistan and Iran, and even Chinese intelligence agencies to raise funds. Because of all this, in the first year 2003 to 2004, the Rahbari Shura managed to collect $20 million. This amount greatly boosted their confidence, and they also obtained some border crossing facilities from Pakistani and Iranian security institutions. These facilities were based on a give and take agreement. Smuggling was the most important point in the arrangement. That is, the Taliban allowed certain goods and certain people to move across, and in return security forces on both sides of the border allowed some of the people in specific goods to pass. All of this was decided secretly with no written agreements, but obviously both sides benefited from it, so it was followed. However, friends, remember that this was a loose agreement in which things would sometimes fluctuate. From 2004, the Quetta Shura formally started its operations. Their first mission was to appoint shadow governors in Afghan provinces. These governors were assigned many responsibilities by the Rahbari Shura, and they had to come and submit reports regularly. Their duties included collecting taxes, recruiting fighters, ensuring protection of Taliban fighters and officials, and sending all financial detail of the finance commission of the Rahbari Shura. Under the supervision of these shadow governors, Taliban teams would come at night on motorcycles and target those people who were cooperating with Americans or the government of Hamid Karzai. Such actions spread fear in the area, and government officials would leave those regions. Wherever government or international forces withdrew, the Taliban would first place their clerics in mosques. Through mosques, they would preach that Afghanistan had been occupied under a Jewish conspiracy and that Americans had started a war against Islam. So people should support the former Islamic Emirate to fight the non-believers, as it was a religious and national duty. To excite the youth, motivational chants were also played on mosques loudspeakers. And friends, you already know from the previous vlog the behavior of Afghan government officials, police and American soldiers had become so contrary to Afghan traditions that people had become extremely angry with them. Because of this, the Taliban's work became easier. Now, from here, the most important task of the Taliban began, tasks that they had to carry out according to their ideology at all costs. Let's look at those tasks one by one. In 2004, the Afghan presidential elections had already taken place, in which Hamid Karzai was elected president. The Taliban were not able to influence that election because they were very weak at that time. But in 2005, parliamentary elections were going to be held in Afghanistan. By the time the Taliban had become stronger, but since they were against democracy and also considered the government to be illegitimate, they did not want the 2005 elections to succeed in any way. Moreover, friends, this was the first time they wanted to show their support fighters and supporters how powerful the Rehbari Shura was and what it could do. Remember at the time when even international media and American intelligence had no idea about the Quetta Shura or the Haqqani Network. So to disrupt the 2005 elections, they contacted intelligence agencies of neighboring countries like Iran and Pakistan and also re-established their old connections with Saudi Arabia and Gulf countries. As a result, they received a significant amount of dollars for their first campaign, according to the book Taliban at War, based on interviews with senior leaders. They received $30 million from neighboring intelligence agencies. With this money, they carried out their first mission. However, even then, although the Taliban had become somewhat organized, they were not yet strong enough. That is why, despite their efforts, they could only affect about 10% of the 2005 Afghan parliamentary elections. They managed to stop voting in about 30 to 40 districts, which were easier targets due to the lack of security forces. In other areas, their efforts were limited to preaching in mosques, where Taliban clerics would deliver speeches to influence people. But democracy is against Islam, so it should be boycotted, and please do not participate in it. The second work that the Leadership Council of the Taliban started in the early years was the destruction of schools, and especially girls' schools. Perhaps for you this is a very surprising thing. Why did the Taliban destroy schools? Actually, behind this there was an ideological foundation of the Taliban. They believed that in Afghanistan schools children should be taught only the curriculum that was prepared during their period of rule under the leadership of Mullah Umar. They considered this to be the Islamic curriculum and the curriculum that was being taught in Afghanistan schools after 2001. They declared it un-Islamic and banned it. They wanted to stop this curriculum at any cost. For this, the Education Commission under the Leadership Council, known as the Quetta Council, Quetta Shura, prepared a plan in 2005. First, through their fronts, they spread the message across Afghanistan that the curriculum prepared after 2001 is forbidden. It should be abandoned and it must not be taught in schools. In second stage, they would search for those schools where their instruction was not being followed and where the new curriculum was still being taught. The administration of such schools was warned to stop teaching this curriculum. But if after warning the school still did not stop the new curriculum, then in the third stage the administration would be beaten, and if even then the same curriculum continued in the school, then the stage of killing teachers, administration and responsible persons or burning the school would begin. So this was the second major operation that the Taliban had already started before 2005. After stopping elections and destroying schools, the third Major campaign from 2005 onwards was launched by the Leadership Council to expand its area of influence. Now, in the areas where the Taliban and Pashtun population had more influence, recruitment was easy. But there were some areas where even during the Taliban rule their control was not strong, such as Herat in western Afghanistan and Mazar-e-Sharif in northern Afghanistan and some other regions. Expanding influence in these areas was necessary because there were the places where the American and the Allied Karzai government was strongest. In these places, the Taliban joined groups that were against the government. In Herat, where the Tajik leader Ismail Khan was present, his opponents, who were few in number, were supported by the Taliban, sometimes with weapons, sometimes by sending fighters, and sometimes by giving dollars. Because of this support, those minority groups became stronger and became allies of the Taliban. They did not become ideological partners like other Taliban groups, but according to the famous rule that the enemy of the enemy is my friend. They became allies of the Taliban because the Leadership Council was supporting them against their enemies. Similarly, in northern Kabul, Baghlan, and in the west Faryab by 2005, strong Taliban fronts had been established and all of them started reporting to the Central Council. The Quetta Shura funding for all of these was also provided by the Leadership Council. Now, where did this funding come from? Here is a surprising point for you. After external support, the biggest financial support for the Taliban inside Afghanistan came from the cultivation of poppy, from which heroin and opium are later produced, especially in provinces like Kandahar and Nangarhar, where this crop was widely cultivated. It became a major source of income. American and Afghan security forces, wherever they saw poppy fields, destroyed them. You know that heroin and opiums are made from poppy cultivation, and Afghan land owners and the contractors earned a lot of money from it. Workers who worked on this crop also earned more compared to other professions. So when these crops were destroyed, the local economy was severely affected. Unemployment was already very high, so the affected people contacted the Taliban and offered them heavy taxes on the condition that the Taliban would protect their crops. The Taliban needs funds urgently, so they deployed their fighters in these areas. As a result, these regions fell into the Taliban's lap like a ripened fruit. A large portion of the local population depended on this crop for livelihood, so they became supporters of the Taliban and the Taliban started receiving tax income from the crop. Then, when heroin was smuggled at border crossings, Taliban members and security officials of neighboring countries also earned large profits. In this way, a system developed that was profitable for all parties involved. If you see security forces in border regions becoming very rich and making investments they cannot explain, and then consider whether they were stationed in areas where heroin smuggling roads passed. Also, let me tell you another interesting thing. Many of you curious readers might think that during the Taliban rule in Afghanistan, they completely banned poppy cultivation. This is partly true, but enforcement was never consistent. The head of the anti-drugs force, Mullah Abdul Rashid, was once asked by the internationally renowned journalist Ahmad Rashid why poppy cultivation was not being stopped. He replied that hashish production is strictly banned because Muslims and Afghan youth use it. But heroin is used by Western non-believers, so its production is not a problem. In the 1990s, the United Nations Drug Control Program held long negotiations with the Taliban. The Taliban's demand was always that they should be given enough funds equivalent to the income from this crop, or an alternative livelihood should be provided. This deal was never finalized, but during this time, poppy cultivation kept increasing and remained a major source of income for the Taliban government. We were talking about how the Taliban organized themselves and fought guerrilla warfare. The commanders of the Leadership Council also led major fronts called big fronts. Each front leader could raise funds independently. For example, Mullah Brother collected funds from Iran, Pakistan, and Arab countries, while Mullah Farooq relied more on Arab countries. A new front was also formed, whose 70% income came from Iran and a significant portion from China. Mullah Akhtar Mansour received support from Iran and Al Qaeda, and at different times also received support from Pakistan. Now, a question must be in your mind: why was America silently seeing all this? The surprising fact is that America itself was also supporting many armed groups and providing financial aid, and this support was sometimes even greater than the aid America was giving to the Afghan government. We will discuss rest in next vlog. Thank you.